I'll talk to these guys over here. I wondered when they signed Odell Beckham Jr. whether or not they were hoping they would have a guy who could be a buffer, a liaison at a time when they just can't get a deal worked out. I mean, look, they overpaid him for a reason, Peter. There was no one else out there, to use the JFK Golf Club's auction analogy again. There was no one holding up the paddle at 14-9 before the Ravens held up the paddle at 15. They overpaid this guy for a reason, and I think one of the reasons was they hope that his presence and maybe, who knows, his involvement can get Lamar Jackson to finally show up.
And obviously, Mike, this is, I've said this in a couple of places this week, this is the $15 million olive branch to Lamar Jackson. I can't imagine. Look, and I've not talked to Harbaugh or DaCosta or anybody in the organization about this, but you don't pay a guy who's had 2 ACL surgeries in the last 3 years, who has not been truly great in 6 years, and who's entering his age 31 season. You don't pay a guy like that a lot of guaranteed money unless there's another reason for you doing the contract. And it just, when I saw the numbers, I almost gasped, because I just thought, man, the Ravens, when they do contracts, they're not afraid to spend money, but they want some assurance that they're going to be spending the money wisely. And quite honestly, I don't know how anybody can look at the career of Odell Beckham Jr. and think that you're going to get 80 catches, 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns. I don't. You can't look at his career numbers, especially recently, and think that he's automatically going to be what he was 8 years ago, 7 years ago. So this is for another reason, as well as getting potentially a very good receiver on your team. And that's saying to Lamar Jackson, please come. And also, by the way, saying to Lamar Jackson, look, there's a good chance still that we're going to take a receiver in the first round of this draft. Might not, but there could be a significantly improved receiving core. And by the way, Mike, I will also say that you've got a new offensive coordinator in Todd Monken, who takes over for Greg Roman. And everybody knows that Greg Roman was a big fan of running the football. Todd Monken is certainly not going to be he's going to call runs. Believe me, he's a balanced guy. But I think that getting Todd Monken into this organization means that there is going to be more of an effort to stretch the field a little bit now that you've got, potentially anyway, a speed guy like Odell Beckham Jr. to pair with, I think, a guy who, if he can stay healthy, could be a good deep receiver in the NFL in Rashad Bateman. I mean, depending on who you get in the draft, if you get, say, a Zay Flowers, all of a sudden you have a team that becomes significantly more attractive, I would think, to Lamar Jackson on what, and Mike, look, we've talked about this a lot. I think this is probably much more likely to be a short-term deal than a long one, if indeed it can get done. Because I think the Ravens, by virtue of what Lamar Jackson said in his Twitter posting, whatever, now almost a month ago, when he responded to, oh, you need an agent. Oh, you mean I need an agent to get $133 million guaranteed? So obviously there's been some sort of offer from the Ravens, a shorter-term deal, either 2 or 3 years, that is going to be either fully guaranteed or virtually fully guaranteed.
The other aspect of the olive branch of the OBJ arrival is, I do believe, a sign that the offense will change. And the Bill Polian narrative about Lamar Jackson not really being a quarterback from 5 years ago, that has lingered because they have been using him to run the ball, designed runs, run it, run it, run it. If they are intent on pivoting toward more of Lamar Jackson passing the ball, think about what popped up last year when Hollywood Brown wants out. And there was this debate over whether it's because of Lamar or it's because of the offense. Well, at some point, they are inextricable. Lamar is the offense that they've designed. They've deliberately designed an offense premised on running the ball with your quarterback, and it de-emphasizes the pass, and it makes receivers not want to be there if they're not going to have the ball thrown their way as much as they would have it thrown their way on another team. If that's changing, and if Lamar Jackson can finally push away that narrative and get people to accept the fact that he can throw the ball pretty well, because so many people just want to write him off as a passer because he's so good as a runner, I think that's part of this effort to change the mindset, change the dynamic, and get him to want to be in Baltimore. Whether it's short-term, whether it's long-term, just get him to want to be there. Eric DeCosta was asked yesterday the question of whether he has had any communications with Lamar Jackson since the news broke that they were signing the player in OBJ that Lamar helped actively recruit to Baltimore. Have a listen.
Well, I have not talked to Lamar since the signing. There's been interaction along the way. Lamar's in our plans. We love Lamar. Our feelings about Lamar have not changed one bit since the end of the season. We're hopeful still that we'll get a long-term deal done. He's the right player for this team to lead us to where we want to be. I think the locker room knows that. The organization knows that. I think the fan base knows that. So it's ongoing. But I can't think of a situation where we wouldn't think that our best team is with Lamar Jackson on the team in September.
There was another comment later, too, on the question of whether there have been communications with Lamar Jackson since he told the team on March 2nd that he'd like to be traded. Because one of the unknowns for me, Peter, was whether or not Lamar Jackson had decided when he asked for a trade, I'm never playing for the Ravens again, much like Deshaun Watson when he decided to ask for a trade from the Texans. I'm just done. It's over. Trade me, or whether it was just part of this broader negotiating dance that they've been clumsily engaged in. And I think it's the latter, because DeCosta said they have had discussions since then. He wouldn't get into the details out of respect for Lamar. They've been very careful not to get into the details publicly, or privately for that matter. But it makes me conclude that Lamar is willing to still play for them. It's just a matter of working this deal out. And if it is OBJ running interference or actually mediating this dispute or somehow being involved to get Lamar back, I feel like he wants to be there still. They want him there still. And it's just a question of working out 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. They just have to get that worked out.
Yeah, as I said and as I've written, Mike, the only thing that really makes sense is either a 2 or 3 year fully guaranteed contract in the range of $45 million a year. And everybody would say, well, geez, now you got Beckham. Why wouldn't you want to ensure the future? And that's a question that I think has been answered quite often in this offseason by the simple facts of this situation. That if you sign a player whose 2 most recent seasons have resulted in 34% of the snaps missed because of injury, you're basically saying that we are willing to pay somebody, $45-50 million guaranteed, for a 4 or 5 year period, when in reality we don't know. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he's not going to be able to make it through these seasons. And again, he might play the next 100 games in a row without ever going down with a stub toe. So you don't know that. But the fact is, I think it would just be financially irresponsible right now to give him a guaranteed contract for 5 years at the market level of pay. And I keep seeing, you see it on Twitter and you see it in other places where everybody is saying, in essence, pay the man. Well, I get that, but what's fair? What's correct? And I know the NFLPA wants to make this basically a test case for guaranteed contracts in the NFL. But to me, I don't see how this could be a test case for guaranteed contracts in the NFL, because I think the only franchise that would kind of give a 5-year guaranteed contract to a guy who had been hurt so much recently is a House of Cards franchise. The Baltimore Ravens are not that.
I've got 2 points I want to make as efficiently as possible. As it relates to your point regarding the Lamar Jackson recent injury history, the 2 consecutive Decembers with injuries that wiped him out, and last year the questions about whether or not he could have come back. That injury history in certain contexts is going to be very relevant to putting a value on the contract. I get it. But boy, it makes it difficult to square that with what they gave to Odell Beckham Jr., who tore his ACL in 2020, came back by the middle of 2021, and he found out, oh, the ACL's gone. And he played the back half of the season without the ACL, and he didn't play at all in 2023, and they give him $15 million plus a not-so-difficult path to $18 million. And if Lamar Jackson had a traditional agent, Peter, the reaction to the Beckham contract would be, what the hell? My guy puts in 5 years. My guy's been here. My guy had a slotted rookie contract. You got a bargain out of this guy. His second year in the league, he was the MVP. He's made you a contender, and he can't get his second contract. You're going to give $15 million guaranteed to a guy who has an ACL that's been torn twice, a guy who didn't play at all last year, a guy that no one else is offering more than $4 million a year in base pay. You're going to give that guy that money, and you're not going to take care of my guy. So this is where the whole thing's kind of been turned on its head because they recognize there's nothing traditional about this. And speaking of traditional ways of valuing a situation, you suggest a short-term deal worth about $45 million a year. For the Ravens to do that, they have to be willing to give up the very strong piece of leverage the CBA gives them. They have the right to squat on Lamar Jackson for $32.4 million this year. They have the right to squat on Lamar Jackson for a 20% increase next year. That's $71 million over 2 years. That's $35.5 million that if they stick to what the CBA allows them to do and they just sit back and say, hey, Lamar, the train's going to keep rolling with you or without you. Here's what we are entitled to put on the table. This is what the CBA requires us to offer you. This is what it is. Sorry, you either take it or you don't. You either take it and play football or you don't play football and don't get paid. If they want to go hardball there, he's going to make $35 million over the next 2 years. And I mention that because to the extent that there is tension and pressure on the teams to take a hard line with their CBA rights, you're giving away $20 million over 2 years that you don't have to give away. And I just don't know that the Ravens are willing to do that. I know they're going to have to do something. They're going to have some sweetener to get him to show up. But I just wonder how much they're going to do when you consider that they could have his rights the next 2 years at a total of $71 million. A short-term deal that would pay him $45 million a year may be something that ownership just won't do, Peter.
Saying to Lamar Jackson, you have to play this year and next year for a total of $71 million would be penny wise and pound foolish. And Lamar Jackson will say, okay, I'll just stay home. He's not going to play for that. And so we can sit here and say what makes sense. Odell Beckham Jr., why'd you give him $15 million? Hey, Mike, $15 million isn't $133 million. You know, what you're trying to do is you're trying to set the stage for Lamar Jackson to feel good about coming back. That's what you're trying to do. And, to me, I think it was Andrew Brandt yesterday. He wrote something at SI.com, or maybe it was just on Twitter, said that the precedence of this contract, of the Deshaun Watson contract, cannot be ignored. Well, yes, it can be. This is not a court of law. This is not something this is not a legal precedent. A team doesn't have to do something because another team did it. Now, in normal circumstances, if Lamar Jackson had been an Iron Man in his first 5 years in the league, then in normal circumstances, probably the Baltimore Ravens would be forced, much against their will, to give a guaranteed long-term contract. Much the same way that Mike Brown in Cincinnati and Dean Spanos in Los Angeles with the Chargers may be forced to do with Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, respectively. However, Lamar Jackson is just a different story. And if you don't acknowledge that it's a different story, you're just sweeping important facts, which honestly many people in the media have done. You're sweeping important facts under the rug, and you're not looking at the situation totally.
Well, Peter, in response to Brant's point, there's two important facts he swept under the rug. Russell Wilson didn't get a fully guaranteed contract, and Kyler Murray didn't get a fully guaranteed contract. So if it sets precedent with Deshaun Watson, what happened to Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson? They don't have fully guaranteed deals. Look, the only way someone is getting the deal Deshaun Watson got is if they can engineer the exact same competition for the player's services the way that Watson's agency did it. You bring 4 teams to the table. You kick one to the curb at the exact right moment where they get desperate and they say, let's give him a fully guaranteed 5-year deal. And what other team is going to do that? What other situation like that is going to arise? And one of the key ingredients is Deshaun Watson saying to the Texans, I'm never playing for you again. So until Lamar's willing to do that, we don't even get to that point. So I agree with you. It's apples to oranges. It's not going to happen for Lamar Jackson. At some point, he's got to say yes to a contract offer. I think the Ravens will offer a sweetener. I won't be surprised if they offer a significant per-game roster bonus to give him an incentive to be out there every week. Maybe we get to the end of the season, he's banged up a little bit, and he's thinking, I don't have any security beyond this year. Why am I going to play if I'm less than 100%, which is perfectly justifiable when you have no contract beyond the current season? Oh, wait, I make X 100,000 more for every game I play. I'll be there. So I think it's going to be something like that they'll get done, maybe with the help of Odell Beckham Jr. acting as that go-between as it relates to the team and Lamar Jackson. Back to... Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.